The Utah wind had teeth. It bit through Thatcher Kane's worn leather coat as he hammered the last fence post into the frozen ground, each strike echoing across the empty valley like a gunshot. February in these parts meant snow on the mountains and frost that wouldn't quit until noon. He'd been at it since dawn, fixing the section of fence that last week's storm had taken down. The cattle needed to stay put, and fences didn't mend themselves. 15 years he'd been doing this alone. 15 years of conversations with horses and arguments with stubborn bulls. The ranch sprawled across 300 acres of hard land, good for grazing when the rains came, good for nothing when they didn't. But it was his, earned with sweat and stubbornness, and he'd sooner die than see it fail. He paused to wipe his brow, squinting at the horizon where the red rocks met the gray sky. Storm coming. Maybe tonight. The air had that heavy feel to it, like the world was holding its breath. He'd need to bring the horses closer to the barn. Make sure Excuse me? Thatcher spun around so fast he nearly dropped the hammer. Standing at his gate was a woman, young, maybe 25, with dark hair escaping from under a travel-worn bonnet. Her dress was city-made but covered in trail dust, the hem heavy with dried mud. She had a carpet bag in one hand and what looked like a letter in the other. "Ma'am." He touched the brim of his hat, more out of habit than courtesy. "You lost." She straightened her shoulders, chin lifting despite the exhaustion clear in her face. "I'm looking for Thatcher Kane." "You found him." He didn't move from behind the fence. Strangers were rare out here, and strange women were unheard of. "What's your business?" "I'm Eloise Mercer." She said it like it should mean something. When he just stared, she added, "Your bride." The word hit him like cold water. He actually took a step back. "My what?" "Your mail-order bride." She held up the letter, and even from 10 feet away, he could see it was addressed to him. "You sent for me. Remember 3 months of correspondence? And you said to come when the winter broke. Well, I know it's still cold, but I couldn't wait any longer. And—" "Lady, I don't know what game you're playing, but I didn't send for any bride." His voice came out rougher than intended. "Haven't written a letter to anyone in years." Her face went from hopeful to confused to something close to panic. But you have to be. This is the Kane Ranch. Isn't it? You're Thatcher Kane." "I am, but I didn't write any letters." She fumbled with the envelope, pulling out several pages with shaking hands. "Look, it's all here. Your signature, your promises about the ranch, about wanting a partner to share your life with. You said you were lonely, that 15 years was too long to be alone." The blood drained from his face. Those were things he'd said. All right, but only to himself, in the dark hours before dawn when the weight of solitude pressed heaviest. He snatched the letter from her hand, scanning the neat script. It was good writing, better than his own, but at the bottom, his signature, or close enough to fool anyone who didn't look too careful. "This isn't my hand," he said flatly. "Someone's played you false, Miss Mercer." The carpet bag hit the ground with a thud. She swayed on her feet, and for a moment he thought she might faint, but she caught herself against the gatepost, knuckles white as she gripped the wood. "No," she whispered. "No, that can't be. I sold everything. My position at the school, my mother's jewelry, everything. I traveled 2,000 miles on promises in those letters." Thatcher looked at her, really looked. Beneath the trail dust and exhaustion was a pretty face, with green eyes that reminded him of spring grass. But pretty faces meant nothing to him anymore. Hadn't for 15 years. "I'm sorry for your troubles," he said, turning back to his fence. "Town's 10 miles east. McCarthy runs a boarding house." "I don't have money for a boarding house." Her voice was steady now, but he could hear the effort it took. "I spent it all getting here." He drove another nail, focusing on the wood. Not his problem. He hadn't asked for this. "Mr. Kane." She hadn't moved from the gate. "I'm not asking for charity. I can work. I can cook, clean, tend animals, just let me stay until I can earn enough to move on. Don't need help. Your fence says different." He glanced at her sharply. She was looking at his repair work with a critical eye. "That's a temporary fix." She continued. "The whole section needs replacing. And from what I can see, your barn roof wants patching before the snow comes. You an expert on ranching now?" "My father was a carpenter. I helped him plenty before he died." She met his gaze steadily. "I'm not afraid of hard work." Thunder rumbled in the distance. They both looked at the sky, where clouds were piling up like gray wool. The temperature was dropping fast. "Storm's coming," he said unnecessarily. "I noticed." She picked up her carpet bag, holding it like armor. "I'll start walking to town. Then 10 miles. You said—" She turned to go, and something twisted in his chest. The image of her walking into that storm. No money, nowhere to go. He thought of another woman, long ago, who'd needed help and hadn't gotten it in time. "Wait." She stopped but didn't turn around. "One night," he heard himself say, "storm will pass by morning. You can sleep in the house." She turned slowly. "And then—" "Then you go to town." She nodded once, sharp and businesslike. "Thank you." He led her to the house without another word, acutely aware of her presence behind him. The house wasn't much 2 rooms and a kitchen, built sturdy but plain. He hadn't had a visitor in couldn't remember how long. "You can have the bedroom," he said, not looking at her. "I'll take the barn. I won't put you out of your own bed." "Wasn't asking." He grabbed a blanket from the chest. "There's beans on the stove. Help yourself." He was at the door when she spoke again. "Mr. Kane, why did you change your mind?" He paused, hand on the latch, outside. The first fat raindrops were starting to fall. "Storm's coming," he said again, and left before she could ask anything else. The barn was cold and smelled of hay and horses. He made a bed in the empty stall, listening to the rain start in earnest, through the gaps in the wall. He could see lamplight in the house window. A woman in his house. After all these years, he pulled out the letter again, studying it by the fading light. Who would do this? Who knew enough about him to write those things, to forge his name? And why? The horses shifted restlessly as thunder crashed overhead. He folded the letter and tucked it away. Tomorrow, he'd take her to town and wash his hands of this mess. Tonight, he'd weather the storm like he always did, alone. But even as he tried to sleep, he couldn't stop thinking about Green Eyes and the way she'd said, "I'm not afraid of hard work." Like she meant it, like she was the kind of woman who'd face down a storm rather than run from it. He turned over, pulling the blanket higher. One night, that's all. Come morning, Eloise Mercer would be on her way, and his life would go back to the way it was, the way it had to be. The rain hammered on the roof, and somewhere in the darkness, a coyote howled. Thatcher closed his eyes and tried not to think about how, for the first time in 15 years, there was someone else under his roof, someone who'd come looking for him, even if it was all based on a lie. One night, he could manage that. The storm raged on, and in the house, the lamplight burned steady against the dark. The morning after the storm dawned clear and cold, with ice crystals hanging from the eaves like nature's chandelier. Thatcher had been up since before dawn, feeding the horses and checking for storm damage. He'd avoided looking at the house, but now, with the sun climbing, he couldn't put it off any longer. She needed to go to town, today. He stomped the mud off his boots and pushed open the door, expecting to find her still asleep. Instead, the smell of coffee and something else biscuits hit him like a physical force. The kitchen was warm, the stove crackling, and Eloise Mercer stood at the counter, sleeves rolled up, kneading dough. "Morning," she said without turning around. "Coffee's ready." He stood frozen in the doorway. The kitchen looked different, cleaner. Somehow, the windows were washed, the floor swept, and was that a jar of wildflowers on the table? "What are you doing?" "Making breakfast." She glanced over her shoulder. "You can't send me off on an empty stomach. That would be unchristian." "I didn't ask for—" "I know." She turned back to her work. "But I don't take charity without giving something back. Sit. Coffee's getting cold." He found himself sitting before he'd made the conscious decision to do so. The coffee was good, better than the bitter brew he usually made. He watched her work, noting the efficient movements, the way she handled the dough like she'd done it 1,000 times before. "Where'd you learn to cook?" "My mother, she ran a boarding house before she married." Eloise slid the biscuits into the oven. "Said a woman should know how to feed people proper, whether it's one man or 20. She set a plate in front of him, eggs, bacon, preserves he'd forgotten he had. He ate in silence, trying not to notice how long it had been since someone else had cooked for him, trying not to think about how the kitchen felt warmer with her in it. "About town," he started. "I've been thinking about that." She poured herself coffee and sat across from him. "The storm washed out the road. Didn't it? I saw from the window." He grimaced. She was right. The creek had overflowed, taking a good chunk of the road with it. "It'll dry in a few days. And until then, you can't stay here." "Why not?" She leaned forward. "I told you, I can work. You need help, don't deny it. This place is too much for one man." "I've managed 15 years. "Have you?" She gestured around the kitchen. "When's the last time these windows were properly cleaned? When did you last have a decent meal that wasn't beans and bread?" "That's not your concern." "No, it's not." She wrapped her hands around her cup. "But I'm here, and I've got nowhere else to go. Let me work for room and board, just until the road's clear and I can earn enough for a train ticket. People will talk." "About what, a housekeeper?" She laughed, but it had a bitter edge. "Mr. Kane, I've already lost my reputation by answering a fraudulent mail-order bride advertisement. What's left to protect?" He pushed back from the table. "The answer's no." But over the next hours, she didn't act like someone who'd been told no. She washed dishes, humming under her breath. She found his mending pile and started on it without asking. When he came in for lunch, she had soup waiting. "You always this stubborn?" he asked. "You always this inhospitable?" They ate in tense silence. Afterward, she headed for the barn. He followed, finding her examining the milk cow. "When's she due?" "Month, maybe less." He was surprised she could tell. "You know cattle?" "Some. We kept a few cows back home." She ran a gentle hand along the cow's flank. "She's carrying low. Might be twins." "She's thrown singles 4 years running." "Things change." She moved to the horses, holding out her hand for them to sniff. His mare, usually standoffish with strangers, lipped at her fingers. "Beautiful animals. You train them yourself?" "Yeah." "They're well loved? You can tell by how they watch you." She turned to face him. "A man who's good to his animals can't be all bad." "Don't make me into something I'm not." She studied him with those green eyes. I'm just seeing what's there." He turned away, uncomfortable under her gaze. "Road should be clear in 3 days. You can stay till then. In the house," he added when she opened her mouth. "I'll keep the barn." "Thank you." The next days fell into an unexpected rhythm. She rose early, had coffee ready when he came in from morning chores. She worked without being asked, mending, cleaning, cooking. She was quiet about it, not chattering like some women did, just steady presence and quiet humming. He started finding reasons to come inside during the day, to check on something, get tools, things he could have managed without. She never commented on it, just poured him coffee and went back to whatever she was doing. On the second night, she found him in the barn, reading by lantern light. "You don't have to sleep out here," she said. "It's your house." "It's fine." She sat on a hay bale. "Can I ask you something?" He grunted, which she took as permission. Your wife, how long ago? His hands tightened on the book. How did you? There are women's things still in the drawer, on the shelf, but covered with dust, like someone's been gone a long time. 15 years. The words came out rough. Fever took her, during the war. I'm sorry. Long time ago. Time doesn't always heal things. Sometimes it just teaches us to walk around the holes. He looked at her then. Really looked? You lose someone. My father, 2 years back, he was all I had left. She plucked at her skirt. That's why I answered the advertisement. Thought maybe I could find something new, build something with someone else who understood loss. Instead, you got swindled. Maybe. She stood. Or maybe I ended up exactly where I needed to be. Before he could respond, she was gone, leaving him with his book and racing thoughts. He tried to read, but the words blurred together. When had she gotten under his skin like this? He'd been careful, kept his distance, but somehow she'd slipped past his defenses with her quiet ways and steady hands. The third morning dawned clear. The road would be passable by afternoon. He found her packing her few belongings, her face carefully neutral. I'll drive you to town after lunch, he said. All right. She didn't look at him. I've left bread rising. It'll need to go in the oven in an hour. I can manage. I know. She tied her bag closed with sharp movements. You've been managing fine. Something in her tone made him defensive. That's right, I have. She finally looked at him. Then why haven't you asked me to leave yet? The question hung between them. He opened his mouth, closed it, because the truth was, he'd woken up that morning and his first thought had been about the road being clear, and instead of relief, he'd felt, what regret? If I'm not wanted, just say so, she continued. But stop pretending this is about propriety, or the road, or whatever excuse you're hiding behind. I'm not hiding. No, then what do you call sleeping in a barn rather than under your own roof? What do you call keeping enough distance between us that we might as well be on different farms? Being appropriate. Being scared. The word hit like a slap. I'm not. Aren't you? She stepped closer. When's the last time you talked to someone for more than 5 minutes? When's the last time you let anyone help you with anything? I don't need help. Everyone needs help sometimes, even you. You don't know anything about me. I know you eat alone every night. I know you talk to your horses more than people. I know you keep your wife's things like a shrine, but won't go in that room. I know you're so locked up inside that kindness feels like a threat. Each word was true, and each one stung. If I'm so terrible, why do you want to stay? Because I see more than that, too. Her voice softened. I see how gentle you are with the animals. I see how you left your own bed so I'd be comfortable. I see a man who's forgotten he deserves care, too. He turned away, unable to face the compassion in her eyes. Road's clear. That's all that matters. Behind him, she sighed, if that's what you need to tell yourself. She went back to her packing. He escaped to the barn, throwing himself into mucking stalls with violent energy. But her words followed him. Scared. Was he scared of what a slip of a woman who cooked his meals and mended his clothes? No. He was scared of how empty the house would feel when she left. Scared of going back to silence and solitude. Scared of how much he'd started to look forward to seeing her in his kitchen, wearing his wife's old apron like it belonged on her. The sun climbed higher. Soon it would be time to take her to town. She'd find work somewhere. Move on. Forget about the rancher who'd kept her at arm's length. And he'd go back to his life. His safe, empty life. From the house came the smell of fresh bread. His stomach twisted, but not from hunger. He set down the pitchfork and walked slowly back, each step heavier than the last. She was at the table, the loaf cooling on a cloth. Her bag sat by the door. Ready. Eloise, he started. She looked up, and he saw she'd been crying. Just a little, just enough to make her eyes bright. "If you stayed," he said slowly, "it would have to be proper, as a housekeeper, with wages." Hope flickered across her face. "And accommodations?" "The house. I'll build a lean-to on the barn. Make it proper quarters for myself." "That seems like a lot of trouble." "Yes, well," he cleared his throat. "Can't have you sleeping in the barn. You'd disturb the horses." A smile tugged at her lips. "They do seem to like me. They have good instincts." The words slipped out before he could stop them. The smile bloomed full. "So do I, Mr. Kane. So do I." They stood there, the kitchen warm around them, fresh bread scenting the air. Not touching, still careful. But something had shifted. A door, long closed, had cracked open. "Call me Thatcher," he said. "If you're staying." "All right, Thatcher." She tested the name. "I'll need a list of duties. And we should discuss wages. After lunch, if that suits you." "It does." He nodded, started to leave, then turned back. "The bread smells good. It'll taste better with the stew I'm planning for dinner." Dinner? She was already thinking ahead, already settling in. He should probably be worried about that. Instead, he found himself almost smiling. "I'll look forward to it," he said, and meant it. 2 weeks had passed since Eloise decided to stay, and they'd settled into a routine that felt almost comfortable. Thatcher had built himself quarters in the barn more than a lean-to. Really, with proper walls and a small stove. She'd protested the expense, but he'd insisted. Propriety mattered, even out here where the nearest neighbor was 5 miles off. The March wind still carried winter's bite, but spring was stirring underneath. Thatcher could smell it in the air as he worked on the fence line, could see it in the swelling buds on the cottonwoods. Soon it would be calving season, planting season, the busiest time of year. For the first time in memory, he wasn't dreading it. He heard her before he saw her boots crunching on the frozen grass, the swish of her skirts. She appeared over the rise carrying a bucket and ladle. "Water," she called. "Thought you might be thirsty." He straightened, wiping sweat despite the cold. "You didn't need to walk all this way. Fresh air's good for a person." She handed him the ladle. "Besides, I wanted to check the creek, see if the snowmelt started." He drank deeply, watching her survey the land with interested eyes. She'd taken to ranch life faster than he'd expected, learning the rhythms, understanding what needed doing without being told. "Storm coming," she said, nodding at the clouds building over the mountains. "Tonight, maybe tomorrow." "Maybe?" He was impressed she could read the weather. "We'll need to bring the cattle closer." "I can help." "You don't know how to drive cattle." "Then teach me." He almost smiled. "You ever even been on a horse?" "No, but I'm a quick study." That afternoon, against his better judgment, he found himself saddling the gentlest mare. Eloise stood in the barn doorway, wearing an old pair of his pants under her skirt. "For modesty," she explained at his look. "Can't very well ride in just a dress." "Most ladies ride side saddle." "I'm not most ladies." She approached the horse carefully, letting it smell her hand. "What's her name?" "Buttercup." "That's a sweet name." "My wife named her—" The words came out easier than expected. "Said a horse that color deserved a sunny name." "She was right." Eloise stroked the mare's neck. "Will you tell me about her, your wife?" He busied himself with the stirrups. "Not much to tell. Her name was Margaret. We married young. Had 5 good years before the fever took her. No children." "No." The old ache stirred. "We wanted them. Just never happened. I'm sorry." "Like I said, long time ago." He helped her mount, trying not to notice how his hands spanned her waist. She settled into the saddle awkwardly, but with determination. "Heels down," he instructed. Hold the reins like this. No, lighter. She's got a soft mouth. They worked for an hour, him walking alongside as she learned to guide the horse. She was right about being a quick study. By the time they stopped, she was riding with confidence, if not grace. "I like it," she said, cheeks flushed from cold and excitement. "The freedom of it." "Wait till you're sore tomorrow." She laughed. "Worth it." That evening, the predicted storm rolled in with a vengeance. Wind howled around the house, rattling windows and doors. Eloise had supper ready, venison stew and cornbread, but she seemed distracted, jumping at every gust. "Just wind," he said. "I know." She pushed food around her plate. "I don't much like storms. Never have since, She trailed off, eyes distant. He waited, but she didn't continue. After supper, she tried to focus on mending while he worked on harness repairs, but her hands shook, and she kept pricking her fingers with the needle. "Maybe you should rest," he suggested. "I'm fine." Thunder crashed, and she flinched. "Just fine." Another hour passed. The storm worsened, and so did she. When a particularly violent gust shook the house, she dropped her sewing entirely. "I think I'll turn in," she said, voice tight. She stood too quickly. The room spun. He could see it in how she swayed, how her face went pale. "Eloise, I just need—" She took a step and crumpled. He caught her before she hit the floor, her weight slight in his arms. Her skin burned with fever. "No," she mumbled. "Can't be sick. Have work to do." "Hush." He carried her to the bedroom, alarmed at how hot she felt. "You're burning up." "The storm," she said, teeth chattering. "Don't like storms. Not since he—" He laid her on the bed, pulling quilts up to her chin. "Since who?" But she was sliding into delirium, muttering words he couldn't catch. He felt her forehead definitely fever, and climbing fast. The nearest doctor was in town. Impossible to reach in this storm. He'd have to handle this himself. Through the night, he battled her fever with cool cloths and willow bark tea when she could swallow. She tossed and turned, sometimes calling out. As dawn approached and the fever peaked, her words became clearer. "Please, Uncle Jonas, I promise I won't tell anyone. Just please don't—" She twisted away from invisible hands, whimpering. Thatcher's jaw clenched. He'd heard enough to understand. "You're safe," he told her, smoothing damp hair from her face. "No one's going to hurt you. You're safe here." She quieted at his voice, turning toward his hand. He kept talking about the ranch, the horses, anything to anchor her to the present. When she shivered, he added more blankets. When she burned, he bathed her face and wrists. The fever broke near noon, leaving her weak but lucid. She blinked up at him, confused. "Thatcher, what? Why are you—" "You've been sick, fever." He wrung out another cloth. "Scared me some." She tried to sit up. "I should make lunch." "You should rest." He pressed her back gently. "I can manage." "But, Eloise, rest." She studied his face. "You've been here all night." "Where else would I be? In the barn, away from the sick woman who's nothing to you." The words stung because they should have been true. She should be nothing to him, just a housekeeper, a temporary arrangement. But sometime in the dark hours, listening to her fight demons he couldn't see, she'd become something more. "You're not nothing," he said quietly. Her eyes filled. "I talked, didn't I, in the fever? Said things. Nothing that matters." "It matters." She turned her face away. "Now you know? Why I really left? Why no decent man would want me?" "Your uncle hurt you." She nodded, just barely. "After Father died, Uncle Jonas took me in, said I should be grateful, said I owed him for his charity. When I refused to be grateful enough, he made sure everyone knew I was loose, Ruined. That's why I answered your advertisement. Thought maybe far away from there, I could start clean. Rage, hot and pure, flooded through him. He wanted to find this Uncle Jonas and teach him about hurting women, but that wouldn't help Eloise now. Look at me. She did, reluctantly. You're not ruined. You're not loose. You're a good woman who survived bad circumstances. That's all. You don't understand. I understand plenty. His voice came out fierce. I understand you're strong enough to leave everything behind and travel 2,000 miles on hope. I understand you work harder than any two people I know. I understand you've brought something to this place I didn't even know was missing. She was crying now, silent tears sliding down pale cheeks. Without thinking, he reached out and brushed them away. The first time he deliberately touched a woman in 15 years. Her skin was soft, softer than he remembered skin could be. Thatcher, she whispered. He pulled back, suddenly aware of the impropriety. She was in bed, vulnerable, dependent on him. This was wrong. You need rest, he said, standing. I'll make some broth. Wait. She caught his hand. Her fingers were small, but her grip was sure. Thank you for staying, for not judging. He squeezed gently, then let go. Rest, that's an order. He made the broth, though it took 3 tries to get it right. She managed a few sips before sleeping again. This time, her rest was peaceful. No nightmares, no fevered rambling, just the quiet breathing of healing sleep. He stayed close through the day, checking on her between chores. By evening, she was sitting up, color returning to her cheeks. I'm embarrassed, she said when he brought dinner, fainting like some delicate flower. Nothing delicate about fighting off fever. He set the tray across her lap. Eat what you can? She managed half the meal before exhaustion took over. As he collected the dishes, she spoke softly. I meant what I said. Thank you. Most men would have. Well, they wouldn't have been so kind. I'm not most men. No, she smiled slightly. You're not. That night, he couldn't bring himself to go to the barn. He made a pallet by the stove, telling himself he needed to be close in case the fever returned. But really, he admitted in the dark hours, he just didn't want to leave her alone. She'd been alone enough. They both had. Morning brought improvement. She insisted on getting up, though he made her take it slow. By afternoon, she was in the kitchen, making bread despite his protests. I need to be useful, she said. That's how I know I'm healing. He understood that. Work as medicine, purpose as cure. They were alike in that way. As she kneaded dough, she spoke carefully. What I told you about my uncle, does it change things between us? He considered his words. It explains things. Why you're so determined to earn your keep. Why storms bother you. But change how I see you, no. You're a good man, Thatcher Kane. I'm a practical man. I know quality when I see it. What happened to you before doesn't change what you are now. She ducked her head, but he caught her smile. They worked in companionable silence. Her with her bread, him repairing a bridle. The storm had passed, leaving crystal clear skies and air sharp as glass. Spring was coming, and with it, change. But for now, this was enough, this quiet understanding, this tentative trust. He'd touched her face in the night, felt her tears, heard her secrets. She'd seen him tender, seen him scared, seen him be more than the cold rancher he'd become. Something had shifted between them, subtle but undeniable. Not love, he wouldn't call it that, but possibility, maybe. The first green shoot pushing through frozen ground, reaching for sun. It was enough. For now, it was enough. The trip to town couldn't be put off any longer. Spring planting meant supplies seed, tools, salt for the livestock. Thatcher had planned to go alone, but Eloise insisted on coming. I need fabric for new work clothes, she'd said, and we're low on flour and coffee. He couldn't argue with the logic, though the thought of facing town gossip made his stomach tight. People would talk. A bachelor rancher with a young woman staying at his place, the story would spread like wildfire. But Eloise climbed into the wagon beside him with her chin high, wearing her best dress and a bonnet that framed her face prettily. If she was nervous, she didn't show it. The road to town wound through red rock country, past stands of juniper and pine. Spring had brought wildflowers, Indian paintbrush, and lupine splashing color across the desert. Eloise exclaimed over them, making him see the familiar landscape through fresh eyes. "It's beautiful here," she said. "Different from Ohio, but beautiful. Most people find it harsh. Most people don't look close enough." She pointed to a hawk circling overhead. "There's life everywhere if you pay attention." Town appeared around a bend one main street, false front buildings, horses tied at hitching posts. Thatcher felt Eloise tense beside him. "They'll stare," he warned. "Let them," but her hands twisted in her lap. He pulled up at the general store, before he could help her down. Jake Monroe emerged from the saloon across the street. Thatcher's jaw clenched. He'd known this moment would come, but he'd hoped for more time. Well, Jake ambled over, that familiar crooked grin on his weathered face. Thatcher Kane come to town, and with company. "Jake," Thatcher kept his voice level. "Ma'am." Jake touched his hat to Eloise. "Jake Monroe, old friend of Thatcher's here." "Miss Mercer." Eloise's response was polite but cool. Jake's grin widened. "The mail-order bride heard you'd arrived. Have to say, you're prettier than I expected from—" "From what?" Thatcher stepped down from the wagon, putting himself between Jake and Eloise. "Just saying she's a fine-looking woman." Jake raised his hands in mock surrender. "No offense meant." "None taken," Eloise said, though her voice could have frosted glass. "If you'll excuse us, we have business to attend to." She swept into the store, leaving the two men facing each other. "Got something to say. Say it," Thatcher growled. Jake's expression sobered. "Already said it in that letter. You were dying out there alone. Thatch, someone had to do something." "You had no right." "I had every right. We rode together for 10 years, fought together. I watched you bury Margaret and turn into a ghost. 15 years. Thatch, 15 years of you hiding on that ranch like a wounded animal. My life is my business." "Not when you're wasting it." Jake stepped closer. "I wrote those letters. Yeah, found a woman who needed a new start and a man who needed to remember he was alive. If that makes me a villain, so be it." "You lied to her, to both of us." "I gave you both a chance." Jake's eyes were serious now. "Look me in the eye and tell me you're sorry she's there. Tell me the place doesn't feel more like a home with her in it." Thatcher couldn't, the words wouldn't come. Jake nodded. "That's what I thought. You can hate me if you need to, but I'd do it again. You deserved better than dying alone out there. And if she leaves when she figures out I'm not the man in those letters, then at least you tried. That's more than you've done in 15 years. Jake walked away, leaving Thatcher standing in the street. Through the store window, he could see Eloise at the counter, head high despite the whispers around her. His chest tightened with something that might have been pride. Inside, Mrs. Pearson, the shopkeeper's wife, was holding court. "Of course, we all wondered when Thatcher would finally take another wife," she said loudly. "Though ordering one through the mail seems rather desperate." "I find nothing desperate about it," Eloise replied calmly, examining a bolt of calico. "Many fine marriages have been arranged through correspondence. It's quite civilized, really." "Still," Mrs. Pearson sniffed. "One has to wonder about a woman who would travel so far to marry a stranger. One might equally wonder about people who have nothing better to do than gossip about their neighbors." Eloise smiled sweetly. "This blue would make lovely curtains, don't you think?" Thatcher bit back a smile. She had Spine, his unexpected houseguest. They finished their shopping with minimal fuss, though the whispers followed them. Loading the wagon. Thatcher noticed Eloise's rigid posture. "You handled that well," he said. "I've had practice. Small towns are the same everywhere." They were heading out when trouble found them. Roy McDubbins, drunk despite the early hour, stumbled from the saloon. "Hey there, Kane. That your mail order woman?" Thatcher kept loading. "Move along, Roy." "Pretty little thing." Roy lurched closer. "How much she cost you? Maybe I'll order one myself." "Watch your mouth." "Or what?" Roy leered at Eloise. "Tell me, sweetheart, he treating you right or you looking for a real man?" "That's enough." Thatcher stepped forward. But Eloise was faster. She marched right up to Roy, barely reaching his shoulder but radiating fury. "A real man." She looked him up and down with withering contempt. "A real man doesn't drink himself stupid before noon. A real man doesn't harass women on the street. A real man certainly doesn't smell like he hasn't bathed since last Christmas." Roy's face went red. "Why, you little—" He raised his hand. Thatcher moved. But again Eloise was quicker. She grabbed Roy's wrist and twisted, using his drunken momentum against him. He stumbled, fell face first in the mud. "My father taught me that," she said conversationally, "right after he taught me to spot worthless men at 40 paces. A crowd had gathered. Someone laughed, then another. Soon half the street was chuckling at Roy sprawled in the mud. "We should go," Eloise murmured to Thatcher. But he was staring at her. This slip of a woman who just dropped a man twice her size. "Where did you—" "Later, please." He helped her into the wagon. As they drove away, he could hear the laughter continuing. Roy McDubbins wouldn't live that down for months. They rode in silence until town disappeared behind them. Then Eloise started shaking. "Pull over," she gasped. He did, and she scrambled down, moving to the side of the road. She didn't get sick, just stood there trembling. "I hate confrontation," she said, "always have. Makes me shake after—" "You didn't look scared." "I was terrified. But I was more angry. How dare he talk about you that way? How dare he reduce what this is to some transaction?" "What is this?" The question slipped out. She turned to face him. "I don't know, but it's not what they think. It's not desperate or shameful or wrong. It's just us, figuring things out. People will keep talking. Let them. I've been talked about before. Survived it." He thought of her facing down Roy, fierce as a wildcat despite her fear. Thought of her in his kitchen, humming while she worked. Thought of holding her through the fever, feeling her trust him with her demons. "Jake Monroe," he said abruptly. "He wrote the letters, signed my name." "I know." He blinked. "You know." "Suspected." The handwriting was too neat. And some phrases, they didn't sound like you. Too flowery. "Why didn't you say anything?" "What would be the point? I'm here. You let me stay. The how doesn't matter as much as the what now." He studied her. "You're not angry?" "At him, a little. At you, no. You didn't ask for any of this." She climbed back into the wagon. "Besides, I think Mr. Monroe might have done us both a favor, even if his methods were questionable." They continued home, the wagon loaded with supplies and unspoken possibilities. As they crested the rise and the ranch came into view, Eloise made a small sound of satisfaction. "What?" he asked. "Nothing, just, it looks like home." Home. The word settled in his chest. Warm and dangerous. When had he started thinking of it as her home, too? That evening, after chores and supper, they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains pink and gold. The confrontation with Roy seemed distant now, less important than this quiet moment. "My father really did teach me that move," Eloise said, Said a woman alone needed to know how to defend herself. Smart man. He was. I miss him every day. She pulled her shawl closer. He would have liked you, appreciated your honesty, your work ethic. I'm not the man Jake made me out to be in those letters. No, you're better. She stood. You're real, flawed and stubborn and kind when you think no one's looking. The man in those letters was fantasy. You're fact. She went inside, leaving him with a dying light and a heart that felt too full. He thought about Jake's words, about chances and trying, about a woman who could drop a man twice her size, then shake like a leaf after. Maybe Jake was right. Maybe he had been dying out there. So gradual he hadn't noticed. But now there was bread rising in his kitchen and a woman humming while she sewed. There was someone to share the sunset with, someone who called this place home. He sat until full dark, letting the truth settle into his bones. He didn't want her to leave, didn't want to go back to the silence, the emptiness, the careful nothing of his life before. That scared him more than any confrontation could, because wanting things meant you could lose them, and he'd already lost so much. But as lamplight spilled from the window and Eloise's shadow moved across the curtains, he thought maybe, just maybe, some things were worth the risk. Spring arrived in earnest, bringing longer days and endless work. The ranch hummed with activity fences to mend, fields to plow, the kitchen garden to plant. For the first time in years, Thatcher found himself looking forward to the season instead of merely enduring it. They'd developed a rhythm, him and Eloise, morning coffee together before he headed out, lunch when he could manage it, supper always shared at the worn kitchen table. She'd taken over the household completely, but also ventured out to help with lighter chores. He'd find her collecting eggs, feeding chickens, even helping with the vegetable garden she'd insisted on expanding. We need more than potatoes and onions, she'd said firmly. A body needs greens. So now there were neat rows of seedlings, lettuce, beans, tomatoes that she tended with the same quiet efficiency she brought to everything. It was a Tuesday afternoon when things shifted again. Thatcher was repairing the chicken coop roof when he heard Eloise call out from the barn. Not alarmed, exactly, but urgent enough to make him climb down quickly. He found her kneeling beside the milk cow, Bessie, who was down on her side, breathing hard. She's in labor, Eloise said without looking up. But something's wrong. The calf is turned. He knelt beside her, running experienced hands over Bessie's swollen sides. She was right, he could feel the calf positioned wrong, could see it in how Bessie strained without progress. You need to turn it, Eloise said. I'll hold her head. You don't need to see this, it's messy work. I've seen messy. She was already moving to Bessie's head, stroking the cow's neck and murmuring soothing words. Do what you need to do. What followed was an hour of struggle. Thatcher working to reposition the calf while Eloise kept Bessie calm. She didn't flinch at the blood or the cow's pained bellows, just kept up a steady stream of comfort. Finally, he got the calf turned. With a last push from Bessie and pull from him, a wet bundle slid into the straw. Then another. Twins, Eloise breathed. I told you she was carrying low. The calves were small but vigorous, struggling to their feet within minutes. Bessie, exhausted but attentive, began cleaning them with long swipes of her tongue. Thatcher sat back on his heels, suddenly aware he was covered in blood and birth fluids. Sorry you had to see that. Are you joking? Eloise's eyes shone. That was miraculous. Look at them, brand new life, perfect and whole. She reached out tentatively, letting one calf suck her finger. Her laugh was pure delight. Thank you, she said softly, for letting me help, for not sending me away. You're good with animals. Steady hands, calm voice. My father used to say I had the touch. Could gentle any creature. She was still watching the calves with wonder. I'd forgotten how much I missed it. They stayed until both calves had nursed and Bessie was back on her feet. Walking back to the house, Thatcher noticed Eloise favoring her left foot. "You're limping." "It's nothing. Knelt on a nail, I think." "Let me see." "It's fine." "Eloise." She sighed but sat on the porch step, lifting her skirt enough to show her boot. Blood had soaked through the leather. "Why didn't you say something?" "Bessie needed help. This could wait." He helped her inside, settling her at the kitchen table before carefully removing the boot. The nail had gone deep, leaving an ugly puncture in her foot. "This needs cleaning," he said. "It'll hurt." "I've had worse." He heated water, gathered clean cloths and the carbolic acid he used for wounds. She gripped the table edge as he cleaned the puncture, but didn't make a sound. "There." He wrapped her foot carefully. "You'll need to stay off it for a few days. But the garden will survive, or I'll tend it. You don't know which are weeds and which are vegetables. Then you'll have to supervise from the porch." He met her stubborn look with one of his own. "Doctor's orders." "You're not a doctor." "Out here, I'm close enough." That night, she insisted on cooking despite his protests. He watched her hobble around the kitchen, determined to maintain her routine. After supper, he carried a basin of hot water to the porch. "For your foot," he explained. "Soak it. Help with the healing." She looked at him strangely. "You don't have to take care of me. You took care of me. When you first came, you could have robbed me blind while I slept in the barn. Instead, you cooked and cleaned and asked nothing in return. That's different." "How?" She had no answer. He set the basin at her feet, then surprised them both by kneeling to help her remove the bandage. "I can manage," she protested. "I know you can. That's not the point." His hands were gentle as he unwrapped her foot, helped her ease it into the warm water. She sighed at the relief. "Better." "Yes, thank you." He should have stood then, gone back to his evening chores. Instead, he found himself sitting on the step beside her, watching the sun sink toward the mountains. "Tell me about Ohio," he said. "What about it?" "What was it like, Green? I imagine different from here." She smiled. "Very green. Very civilized. Trees everywhere. Neat little farms with neat little fences. Church socials and quilting bees and everyone knowing everyone else's business. You miss it. Parts of it. The green most of all. And fireflies, we don't have those here. Summer evenings. They'd fill the air like tiny stars." She moved her foot in the water. "But I don't miss the rest. The watching, the whispering. Here, there's space to breathe." "Even with the town gossips." "That's just a few people. Back home, it was everyone, always watching, always judging, especially after—" She trailed off. He waited, having learned that pushing her to talk only made her close up. "After my father died," she continued quietly, "I was fair game, an unmarried woman alone, with a little property and no protection. Every man in town suddenly had ideas about my future. When I refused them, they got ugly about it. Said I was too proud, too particular. Said I needed taking down a peg." "Your uncle." "Was the worst of them, but not the only one." She pulled her foot from the water, examining the wrinkled sole. "That's why the advertisement seemed like salvation, a chance to go where nobody knew my story. Instead, you got a cranky rancher who made you sleep alone while he took the barn." "You were protecting my reputation." "I was protecting myself." The admission came hard. It was easier to keep distance, safer. And now he was sitting close enough to smell the lavender soap she used, close enough to see gold flecks in her green eyes. Now he was kneeling at her feet like a suitor, tending wounds she'd earned helping him. "Now I think safe is overrated," he said. She turned to look at him fully. The setting sun caught her hair, turning dark strands to copper. For a moment, neither moved. Then she reached out, fingers barely brushing his cheek where a scratch from the morning's work had left a red line. "You should put something on that," she said softly. It could fester. It's nothing. That's what I said about my foot. Point taken. But neither moved. Her hand was still near his face, almost touching. His heart hammered like he was a green boy, not a man past 40 who'd buried a wife. A coyote called in the distance, breaking the spell. Eloise pulled back, busying herself with drying her foot. I should check on Bessie, he said, standing. Make sure the calves are nursing proper. Of course, I'll clean up here. He fled to the barn, calling himself 7 kinds of fool. What was he doing, sitting so close, letting her touch him? This was exactly what he'd tried to avoid. But in the barn, watching the twin calves stumble around on new legs, he couldn't regret it. Life was short and uncertain. His wife had taught him that, dying so young. These past weeks had taught him something else, that surviving wasn't the same as living. When he returned to the house, Eloise had managed the kitchen despite her injury. The floors were swept, dishes washed, everything in its place. She sat at the table, working on mending by lamplight. Thought I told you to rest. This is resting. See, sitting down. She held up the shirt she was patching. You're hard on clothes. Ranch work will do that. I've noticed. Half your shirts are more patch than shirt. She bit off a thread. I've been thinking about that fabric we bought. Might make you some new ones, if you don't mind. You don't need to. I know, but I want to call it earning my keep. You've more than earned your keep. Then call it something else. She set down the mending, looking at him directly. Call it caring about someone enough to want them to have nice things, even small nice things, like shirts without holes. The words hung between them. He thought about the basin of water, about her hand on his face, about 15 years of keeping everyone at arm's length. I'd be grateful for new shirts, he said finally. These are about worn through. She smiled, the lamplight soft on her face. I'll start tomorrow. After your foot heals. It's just a little puncture. Eloise. Fine. After it heals. Tyrant. That's Mr. Tyrant to you. She laughed, and the sound filled the kitchen like sunshine. He found himself smiling back, really smiling, the kind that made his face ache from disuse. This was what Jake had seen, what his meddling friend had hoped for. Not just a housekeeper or companion, but this laughter and gentle arguments and someone to share the small victories like twin calves and sprouting gardens. Later, lying in his narrow barn bed, he thought about that moment on the porch, the near touch, the possibility of more. He'd pulled back, and so had she. But the door had been opened, just a crack, just enough to let light in. He thought about her limping around the kitchen, determined to maintain her independence, even hurt. Thought about her hands steady on Bessie while birth blood soaked her skirts. Thought about green eyes and copper-touched hair and a laugh that made him remember what happiness sounded like. Tomorrow he'd check her bandage, make sure the wound was clean. Tomorrow he'd work on expanding the garden she wanted, even if he couldn't tell a weed from a bean sprout. Tomorrow he'd sit across from her at breakfast and let himself enjoy the simple pleasure of not being alone. Tonight, though, he lay in the dark and admitted the truth. He was falling for Eloise Mercer. Maybe had been since that first morning when she'd stood her ground and made him coffee. It terrified him down to his bones. But there it was. The question now was what to do about it, and whether she felt even a fraction of the same. The summer heat had settled over Utah like a heavy blanket, making the air shimmer over the red rocks. It was market day in town, and Thatcher had reluctantly agreed to let Eloise accompany him again. Her foot had healed well, and she'd argued convincingly about needing supplies for preserving season. Besides, she'd said that morning, I can't hide from town gossip forever, might as well face it head on. Now, watching her examine peaches at the market stall, he wondered if this had been a mistake. The whispers had started the moment they'd arrived, following them from booth to booth like persistent flies. That's the mail-order bride, someone muttered. Living in sin out at the Kane place. another added. Poor Thatcher, desperate enough to buy a woman. Eloise's shoulders tensed with each comment, but she kept her smile firmly in place. Chatting with vendors about vegetables and fabric, Thatcher wanted to grab her hand, to show some kind of support, but that would only fuel more talk. They were loading the wagon with supplies when real trouble arrived. 3 women approached Mrs. Pearson from the general store, Judge Garrett's wife, and Martha Hutchins, the town's most devoted gossip. Miss Mercer, Mrs. Pearson's voice dripped false sweetness. How interesting to see you in town again. Mrs. Pearson. Eloise nodded politely. Lovely day for the market? Indeed, though some of us prefer to maintain proper standards, regardless of the weather. Her gaze swept over Eloise's simple dress with obvious disdain. Tell me, what exactly is your position at the Kane Ranch? I'm the housekeeper. Housekeeper, Martha Hutchins snorted. Is that what they're calling it now? Thatcher stepped forward. Ladies. Oh, Mr. Kane, Mrs. Garrett interrupted. We were just expressing concern about your arrangements. Surely you understand how it looks. A bachelor and an unmarried woman. What I understand, Thatcher said quietly, is that Miss Mercer works hard, keeps a clean house, and deserves respect. Respect? Martha's laugh was ugly. For a woman who travels thousands of miles to trick a man into marriage. No one tricked anyone, Eloise said, but her voice shook slightly. No, then why the mail-order bride story? Why the pretense Mrs.? Pearson moved closer. Unless you're just another fortune hunter after poor Thatcher's land. That's enough. Thatcher's voice carried the kind of authority that came from years of handling stubborn cattle and harder men. But Martha wasn't done. We know about you, Miss Mercer. I have a cousin in Ohio. She wrote about the scandal, how you threw yourself at every man in town after your father died, how your own uncle had to protect his reputation from your advances. The color drained from Eloise's face. That's not... Mail-order hussy, someone called from the gathering crowd. Probably serviced half of Ohio before coming here. The word hit like a physical blow. Eloise swayed, and Thatcher saw red. You're wrong. His voice carried across the square. Every last one of you. Wrong! Thatcher! Eloise tugged at his arm. But he was done. Done with the whispers, the judgment, the small-minded cruelty of people who had nothing better to do than tear others down. This woman, he said loudly, has more integrity in her little finger than most of you possess entirely. She works from dawn to dusk without complaint. She tends the sick, helps birth calves, grows food to feed us. She brought life back to a house that had been dead for 15 years. Pretty words. Mrs. Pearson sneered. But they don't change what she is. You're right, they don't. Thatcher stepped closer to the women. She's kind, generous, strong, and she's under my protection. Anyone who insults her insults me. Your protection? Martha's eyes gleamed with malicious delight. How cozy. Tell us, Thatcher, exactly what kind of protection does she receive? The kind that happens after dark. The slap of flesh on flesh cracked through the air. But it wasn't Thatcher who'd moved, it was Eloise, her palm print blazing red on Martha's cheek. You can say what you want about me, Eloise said, voice steady now. But you will not imply that Thatcher is anything less than a complete gentleman. He's shown me more true respect than anyone in your precious social circle ever has. Martha sputtered, hand on her cheek. How dare you? How dare you? Eloise stepped forward, and Martha actually backed up. You stand here in your fine dress, bought with your husband's money, having never worked a day in your life. And you judge me, you spread lies and call it concern. You destroy reputations for sport and call it propriety. The truth isn't lies, Mrs. Garrett said, though she'd moved behind Martha. The truth, Eloise laughed bitterly, The truth is that my uncle tried to force himself on me after Father died. When I fought him off, he spread those rumors to cover his own shame. The truth is that I answered that advertisement because I had nowhere else to go, no one else to turn to. The truth is that yes, it was all a mistake, but the best mistake I've ever made." She turned to Thatcher, eyes bright with unshed tears. "I'm sorry. I've brought shame to your name, to your ranch. I'll pack my things." "No." The word came out fiercer than he'd intended. He caught her arm as she turned to go. "No," he said again, gentler. "You're not going anywhere." "Thatcher, these people don't matter. Their opinions, their gossip, none of it matters." He was speaking just to her now. The crowd forgotten. What matters is the work we do, the life we're building, He stopped, aware they had an audience. But Eloise was looking at him with such hope, such fragility, that he couldn't hold back. "What matters is that my house feels like a home again. What matters is that I look forward to each day instead of just enduring it. What matters is you." Someone in the crowd gasped. He ignored them, focused on the woman in front of him. "Stay," he said simply. "Please." A tear slipped down her cheek. "Even after this, after what they'll say. I'll let them talk themselves hoarse. We've got a ranch to run." She searched his face, then nodded slowly. "All right." He helped her onto the wagon, very aware of the stunned silence around them. As they drove away, he heard the buzz of conversation explode behind them. They rode without speaking until town disappeared. Then Eloise said quietly, "You defended me. You defended yourself pretty well. Nice slap." "I shouldn't have. Ladies don't strike people. Ladies also don't birth calves or break horses or work from dawn to dusk. You're not most ladies." "No," she said softly. "I suppose I'm not." They were passing through a grove of cottonwoods when she spoke again. "What you said back there, about me mattering, did you mean it?" He pulled the horses to a stop. The trees provided shade and privacy, their leaves whispering secrets to the wind. "I meant every word, even the part about building a life together." His heart hammered, especially that part. She was quiet so long he wondered if he'd said too much. Then, "I need to show you something." She climbed down from the wagon before he could help, moving to the back where their supplies were stacked. From beneath a bolt of fabric, she pulled out a small wrapped package. "I bought this today, before all that happened." She handed it to him. "Open it." Inside was a pocket watch, silver and simple but well made. He opened it to find an inscription. "Time heals, but love heals faster." "Eloise!" "I know it's forward of me. I know we haven't, that things between us are—" She took a breath. "But when I saw it, I thought of you, of how you've been marking time for 15 years, and maybe it's time to start living again." He stared at the watch, at the inscription, at this gift she'd bought before the confrontation, before his public declaration, when she still thought she might have to leave. "You were going to give this to me even if I'd let you go. I wanted you to remember that someone cared, that you deserved care." Something broke inside him then. The last wall. The final defense against feeling too much, wanting too much. He set the watch carefully aside and did what he'd wanted to do for weeks. He pulled her into his arms. She fit against him like she belonged there, her head tucked under his chin, her arms sliding around his waist. He could feel her trembling, or maybe that was him. It had been so long since he'd held anyone, since he'd allowed himself this closeness. "I'm scared," she whispered into his shirt. "Me too. What if we're making a mistake?" He pulled back enough to see her face. "Remember what you said about the best mistakes?" She smiled through tears. "I do." "Then let's make this one together." He should have kissed her then. The moment was right. Her face tilted up to his, lips parted slightly, but a lifetime of caution held him back. Instead, he pressed his forehead to hers, sharing breath, sharing space. "When you're ready," he said softly. "When we're both ready. There's no rush." "Patience," she murmured. "Another thing I like about you." The near slip made them both freeze. Then Eloise laughed, nervous and bright. "We should get home," she said. "The peaches won't preserve themselves." "Right, peaches." They climbed back onto the wagon, but this time she sat closer, their shoulders touching. The watch was safe in his pocket, its weight a constant reminder of her faith in him. As they neared the ranch, Eloise asked, "Do you regret it? What happened in town?" "Which part?" "Any of it. All of it." He thought about the faces, the gossip that would spread like wildfire. Tomorrow, everyone in 3 counties would know that Thatcher Kane had publicly claimed his mail-order bride. They'd whisper about the slap, the confrontation, his declaration. "No," he said finally. "I don't regret it. They needed to know you're not alone, that someone will stand with you. You could have done that without making it seem like there's something between us." He pulled the horses to a stop at the ranch gate, turning to look at her fully. "Eloise, there is something between us. Has been for weeks. We can pretend otherwise, but that won't make it less true." She met his gaze steadily. "I know. I don't want you to feel obligated, because of the letters or the situation or—" "I feel a lot of things," he interrupted. "Obligation isn't one of them." They sat there in the afternoon heat. The ranch spread before them. Everything different now. The confrontation had forced things into the open that might have stayed hidden for months, but maybe that was for the best. "Come on," he said finally. "Let's go home." Home. The word had weight now, meaning it wasn't just his place anymore. It was theirs, built from shared work and quiet evenings and all the small moments that had led them here. As they unloaded supplies, working side by side in comfortable rhythm, Thatcher felt the watch's weight in his pocket. Time heals, but love heals faster. He wasn't ready to say the word yet. Might not be for a while, but he was beginning to believe it might be possible. And that was enough. For now, it was more than enough. The late summer evening cast long shadows across the ranch as Thatcher finished the last of the day's chores. The confrontation in town 2 weeks ago had changed things, made their situation public in a way that couldn't be taken back. But here, in their daily routine, life continued much as before coffee at dawn, shared meals, the comfortable rhythm they'd built together. Tonight felt different, though. Eloise had been quiet all day, distracted. She'd burned the cornbread at lunch, forgotten to collect eggs, started 3 different tasks without finishing any. Now she stood at the kitchen window, staring out at nothing. "Something on your mind?" he asked, hanging his hat by the door. She startled, "Just thinking." Dangerous habit. Usually that would earn him a smile. Tonight. She just turned back to the window. "Do you ever go through her things, Margaret's?" The question caught him off guard. "Not really. No." "They're still there, though. In the bedroom chest. Her clothes, her books." "Never saw reason to move them." "It's been 15 years. Thatcher." He felt his defenses rising. "What's this about?" She finally faced him, and he saw she'd been crying. "I found something today. I wasn't snooping. I swear, I was just looking for extra linens. And—" She held out a small leather journal, worn at the edges. His chest tightened. Margaret's diary. He'd forgotten it existed. "I didn't read much," Eloise said quickly, just enough to realize what it was. "But Thatcher, she wrote about you, about how happy you made her." "Don't!" The word came out harsher than intended. "She loved you so much, the way she described you, young and strong and full of dreams. She wrote about the children you'd have, the life you'd build." I said, "Don't." "You blame yourself." It wasn't a question. "For her death, For not being able to save her. The journal trembled in her outstretched hand. He couldn't look at it, couldn't think about Margaret's neat script. Her plans and hopes turned to dust. The fever took half the county. Eloise continued softly. There was nothing anyone could do. I should have gotten the doctor sooner. Should have tried. You did try. I can see it in how you doctor the animals, how you noticed my hurt foot before I said anything. You tried to save her. Thatcher, it just wasn't enough. Then what good am I? The words ripped out of him. What's the point of surviving if I couldn't save the one person who mattered? Because maybe you're meant to matter to someone else. The kitchen went quiet, except for the tick of the clock, the one he'd stopped winding after Margaret died, that Eloise had quietly restored to working order her first week here. I'll never be her, Eloise said. I know that. I'm too practical where she was romantic, too stubborn where she was sweet, but I— Stop! He crossed to her in 2 strides, taking the journal and setting it aside. Just stop. I'm trying to tell you something. I know what you're trying to tell me. His hands found her shoulders. And you're wrong. You're not to anything. You're just— you. Is that enough? The vulnerability in her eyes undid him. More than enough. God, Eloise, you're everything I didn't know I needed. But I'm broken. I've been walking around with pieces missing for so long, I don't know how to be whole anymore. I'm not asking you to be whole. Her hands came up to rest on his chest. I'm not whole either. That's what I realized today. Reading her words. We're both carrying ghosts. But maybe 2 broken people can build something new. He thought about the watch she'd given him, sitting on his bedside table in the barn. Time heals, but love heals faster. Such hope in those words. Such faith that he could be more than what he'd become. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. How to let someone in again. I don't either, but we've been doing it anyway. Haven't we, little by little? She was right. Somewhere between that first morning coffee and now, she'd slipped past all his careful guards. He knew how she took her eggs over easy, how she hummed when happy old hymns, mostly, how she bit her lip when concentrating on mending, knew she was afraid of thunderstorms but would face down a charging bull without flinching, knew she talked to the chickens like they were people and had named every one. I can't promise to be the man Margaret married, he said. That version of me died with her. I'm not asking for him. I'm asking for the man who defended me in town, who sat with me through fever dreams, who notices when I'm favoring a hurt foot and makes me soak it even when I protest. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I'm asking for you exactly as you are. The last of his resistance crumbled. He pulled her against him, burying his face in her hair. She smelled of bread and sunshine and something uniquely her. I'm scared I'll fail you, he whispered, that I'll let you down like I let her down. The only way you could fail me is by not trying. He pulled back to look at her. Tears tracked down her cheeks, but she was smiling that crooked, determined smile that had become precious to him. Eloise Mercer, he said slowly. Are you saying you want to stay not as my housekeeper, but as more? I'm saying I love this ranch. I love the work, the animals, the way the mountains look at sunset. She took a shaky breath. And I love the stubborn, complicated man who owns it all. The word hung between them, enormous and fragile. Love. She'd said it first, brave as always. You barely know me, he said, though his heart was racing. I know you leave your crusts because you think the chickens like them better. I know you check on Bessie's calves 3 times a night because you're still worried about them being twins. I know you've read every book in this house except your wife's diary because you're afraid of the pain. Her hand found his cheek. I know you're honorable and kind and worth loving. The rest, we can learn together. Together. He tested the word. Found it fit better than expected. Would you consider— Thatcher Kane, are you trying to propose— Heat climbed his neck. Maybe. Yes, But not because of the town gossip or propriety. Because I wake up looking forward to seeing you. Because the thought of you leaving makes me feel hollow. Because somewhere between you dropping Roy McDubbins in the mud and slapping Martha Hutchins, I fell completely in love with you. Now she was crying in earnest, but laughing too. That's the worst proposal I've ever heard. It's the only one I've got. Then I suppose I'll have to accept it. He kissed her then, finally, after months of wanting to. It was awkward at first, he was out of practice, and they were both crying a little, but then she sighed and melted against him, and it felt like coming home after a long, cold journey. When they broke apart, both breathless, she said, "We'll need to do this proper, a real wedding, not just promises between us. Jake can stand witness. He'll be insufferably smug about it." "Let him be smug. He was right, we did need each other." Thatcher picked up Margaret's journal from where he'd set it aside. The leather was soft with age, full of a young woman's dreams. "We should read this together sometime," he said. "She was part of making me who I am, part of the story that brought us here. I'd like that, to know her through her own words." He set the journal on the shelf, not hidden away, but not a shrine either, just part of the past that had shaped the present. "So what now?" Eloise asked. "Do I move my things to the main bedroom? Do you move back to the house?" "Slow," he said, though every part of him wanted to say yes to both. "We've waited this long. We can court proper, even if the whole town already thinks, well..." "Mr. Kane, are you protecting my virtue?" "What's left of it," he teased, then yelped as she swatted his arm. "I'll have you know my virtue is entirely intact. Thank you very much." "Good. I'd like to be the one to change that. After we're married, in a bed that doesn't smell like hay and horses." She blushed prettily. "Romantic talk like that will turn a girl's head." "You want romantic? How about this, Eloise Mercer? You make my coffee perfect every morning. You've trained my chickens to come when called. You can birth calves and bake bread and stand up to the nastiest gossips in town. You're sunshine in my kitchen and starlight in my darkness. Marry me, and I'll spend every day trying to deserve you." "Now that's better." She kissed him again, quick and sweet. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They stood in the kitchen as evening deepened, holding each other and making plans. A small wedding, just friends and the few townsfolk who'd shown kindness. New curtains for the windows. Maybe expanding the house come spring for children, Eloise said shyly, and his heart nearly burst. Later, he walked her to her bedroom door like a proper suitor. "Good night, Miss Mercer." "Good night, Mr. Kane." She paused. "Thatcher, you know I didn't really come here by mistake, right? However it happened. I was meant to find you." "I know." He kissed her forehead. "Best mistake anyone ever made." She slipped inside, and he headed for the barn, but his steps were light, in his pocket. The watch ticked steadily, marking new time. Not just surviving anymore, but living. Not just enduring, but hoping. He paused at the barn door, looking back at the house. Lamplight glowed warm in the windows, in both windows now. Her room and the kitchen. For 15 years, he'd lived in darkness. Now there was light again, and love, and the promise of tomorrow. It was more than enough. It was everything. Spring had returned to the Utah territory, painting the desert in shades of green and gold. The ranch looked different now. Garden expanded. Fences properly mended. New curtains in the windows that Eloise had sewn over the winter. But the biggest change was in the atmosphere itself, where once silence had reigned. Now there was laughter, conversation, and the comfortable sounds of a life shared. Thatcher stood in the doorway of what had been Margaret's sewing room, now transformed into a nursery. Eloise sat in the rocking chair he'd made, her hands resting on her rounded belly, humming softly to the child within. "You should be resting," he said. She looked up with that smile that still made his heart skip. "I am resting. See, sitting down and everything." Doc Morrison said, "That I'm healthy as a horse and the baby's growing perfect? Stop fretting." He crossed to her, kneeling beside the chair. 6 months married, and he still sometimes couldn't believe she was real. The small wedding had been exactly what they'd wanted, Jake standing as witness with the biggest grin Thatcher had ever seen. A few friends from neighboring ranches, even Mrs. Garrett had come to offer stilted congratulations. "Can't help it," he said, placing his hand over hers on her belly. "Both of you are too precious to risk." As if in response, the baby kicked strong and sure. They both laughed. "This one's going to be a fighter," Eloise said, "just like the parents." "Speaking of fighting, Jake's coming by later. Wants to see the new foal." And gloat about his matchmaking skills. "That too." She stood carefully, Thatcher helping her up. "I'll make extra coffee. You know how he drinks it like water." They walked to the kitchen together, Thatcher's hand at her back. The house felt alive now, fresh bread cooling on the counter, wildflowers in a vase. The curtains she'd made bringing warmth to every room. Even Margaret's things had found new purpose. Her books on the shelf beside Eloise's, her quilts repaired and used. "I was thinking," Eloise said, pulling down cups, "about names." "Oh, if it's a boy, I'd like to call him Thomas, after my father. Thomas Kane. Good, strong name." "And if it's a girl—" She paused, then met his eyes. "Margaret, if that's not too painful." His throat tightened. They'd read Margaret's journal together over the winter, learning about the young woman who'd loved him first. It had hurt, but it had also healed something, letting him see that love wasn't betrayal, that moving forward honored the past rather than erasing it. "She would have liked you," he said softly. "Would have been happy I found you." "I hope so. I think about her sometimes, when I'm doing things she used to do, feeding her chickens, tending her garden. It feels like she's part of the story somehow, part of what brought us together." A horse approaching interrupted the moment. Through the window, they saw Jake dismounting, still wearing that satisfied grin he'd sported since their wedding. "Here comes trouble," Thatcher muttered. "Be nice. He meant well. He lied and forged my signature. And gave us both a chance at happiness. I'd say that earns forgiveness." Jake knocked and entered without waiting, as was his way. "Well, if it isn't the happy couple, Eloise. You're glowing. Thatcher, you still look like you've been kicked by a mule, but happier about it." "Good to see you too, Jake," Eloise said, already pouring coffee. "How's my godchild doing?" Jake asked, nodding at her belly. "Since when are you the godfather?" Thatcher demanded. "Since I'm the reason that child exists. Without my brilliant letter-writing campaign—" "Your criminal forgery, you mean—" "Details." Jake waved dismissively. "Point is, you two are married, happy, and multiplying. You're welcome." Despite himself, Thatcher smiled. The truth was, he owed Jake everything. That meddling letter had brought Eloise to his door, had cracked open his hermit shell and let life back in. They spent the afternoon in comfortable companionship, Jake regaling them with town gossip while they showed off the ranch improvements. The new foal was admired, the expanded garden praised, and Jake even helped repair a stall door that had been sticking. As the sun began to sink, Jake prepared to leave. At the door, he turned serious for once. "I'm proud of you, Thatch, both of you. What you've built here, it's good to see." "Thank you," Eloise said, "for everything, even the parts that weren't exactly legal." "Especially those parts." Jake winked. "Take care of each other. And when that baby comes, I expect to be the first to know." After he left, Thatcher and Eloise sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold. She leaned against him, his arm around her shoulders, her hand finding his. "No regrets?" she asked softly. "Not one. You—" Only that I didn't find you sooner. You found me exactly when you were meant to, when I was ready to be found. She turned to look at him. Do you really believe that it was meant to be? I believe Jake Monroe is a meddling fool who accidentally did something brilliant. I believe you were brave enough to travel 2,000 miles on a promise. I believe I was just stubborn enough to let you stay despite my fears. He kissed her temple. Call it fate or accident or divine comedy doesn't matter. What matters is we're here now. The worst mail-order bride mistake in history, she said with a laugh. The best mistake, he corrected. Our perfectly imperfect beginning. The baby kicked again, and they both felt it new life affirming their choices. Tomorrow there would be work. Always work on a ranch. But there would also be shared meals and quiet evenings, laughter and probably some tears, the 1,000 small moments that made a life together. I love you, Eloise said simply, my cranky, wonderful, complicated rancher. And I love you, my stubborn, brave, extraordinary wife. They sat until full dark, the first stars appearing over the mountains. Inside, a lamp waited to be lit, supper to be made, all the ordinary magic of their life together. But for now, this was enough, the two of them on the porch of the home they'd made, hearts full of gratitude for the strange path that had brought them together. In the distance, a coyote called to its mate, and somewhere in the barn, a horse nickered softly. The ranch that had been silent for so long now hummed with life, with love, with the promise of tomorrow. Eloise stood carefully. Come on, Papa, time for supper. Papa? He tested the word, found he liked it. I could get used to that. Good. You've got about 3 months to practice. Hand in hand, they went inside, leaving the vast Utah night to its own devices. Through the windows, lamplight spilled warm and welcoming, a beacon in the darkness that said, here is home, here is love, here is life begun anew. And in the spring evening, with new life growing and old wounds healed, it was more than enough. It was everything. Thank you for listening to this story of love found in the most unexpected ways. Where are you listening from tonight? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Share where you're tuning in from and what touched your heart in Thatcher and Eloise's journey. If you enjoyed this tale from the American frontier, please subscribe to Wild West Night for more stories of romance, redemption, and real life in the Old West. Don't forget to like this video and hit that hype button to help more listeners discover these heartfelt stories under the stars. Until next time, partners.